What's going on, everybody? Dominic Caminata here in another beautiful Warrior Wisdom Walk. I'd like to thank you for joining me here today. It's a special edition of the Warrior Wisdom Walk because today I'm joined by this gentleman, Elijah Caminata. How you doing, brother?
I'm good.
That's good. I'd like to thank you for walking with me. And I got a very exciting topic we're going to be talking about. And this is something certainly that comes up often in conversations with my clients, especially clients that are trying to command high-performance sales teams. They're trying to figure out, how do I actually create sales meetings that my salespeople actually want to attend? So that's going to be the headline of today's Warrior Wisdom Walk, is basically how to structure your sales meetings so it doesn't feel like pulling teeth. Getting your salespeople to want to come is something they actually enjoy coming to. And they're actually eager to come because each time they go, they not only take away some tools, training, information, education that helps them in their profession, but they also kind of get re-energized, re-inspired, re-motivated to go out there, kick butt, and take names for the next week. So kind of going to break down a step-by-step framework. Think of this as like 9 keys to having a high-performance sales meeting that people want to actually attend. So the first thing I just want to talk about, like step 1, let's make sure we're having these meetings weekly. I know a lot of owners, whether they don't like taking their reps off the road because of lead flow, or they think they're going to overdo it by having meetings too frequently, it's going to burn out their sales team. For one reason or the other, they're afraid to have weekly sales meetings. And I know some companies that take the opposite approach, where every day they're having a sales meeting. I think certainly you can overdo it, but one thing I know for certain is 2 weeks is like an eternity in the profession of selling. So if I have 2-3 weeks in between meetings, or even worse, a month between our in-person trainings, that's a long time for bad habits to spread, bad habits to be reinforced, negative thoughts, negative mindsets to kind of get reinforced. So I want to make sure that I have enough touch points with my salespeople to keep them inspired. So I've said this on previous videos that I believe the most important KPI in leadership is keeping people inspired. So first thing, I want to make sure we're having our sales meetings each week. So every week, preferably early in the week. I certainly don't want to have my sales meetings on a Friday, so I get these salespeople fired up and energized to go hang out on the weekend. So of course, early in the week, get that shot in the arm, get some education, some knowledge, some wisdom, get some motivation, go out there and perform at their best for the following week. So here's something I almost never see when I'm training companies all over the country. And this is not just for the small companies. I'm talking about, like, I almost never see this anywhere, is where when people have sales meetings, they have a detailed agenda.
It's time to listen up, closers. Before you go any further, you need to hear this. The Grosso University Sales Academy Masterclass is not just another training opportunity. This is the most in-demand, highest-rating sales training program in the history of the home improvement industry. Thousands of sales warriors just like you have gone through this life-changing program taught by our world-class head sales trainer, Daniel Coombsbury, and they are winning more and bigger because of it. If you're serious about dominating in sales, this is where you go to sharpen your edge. The best part is, it's 100% virtual and happens on the second Monday of every month, so there are absolutely zero excuses not to invest in your growth and development. Why don't you go ahead and hit the link in the description to learn more and lock in your spot and get ready to ignite the greatness within. On behalf of Grosso University, yes, you are a closer, and back to the video.
So one thing I was really passionate about when I was hosting sales meetings is, we're going to turn left here, is having a detailed agenda that broke down step by step, very clearly, exactly what we were going to be covering and what the focus was going to be for that sales meeting. So I found that if I didn't have clear focus, a clear target as to what we wanted to achieve, sales meetings became very watered down. They kind of became wild, wild west, shoot from the hip, where the subject matter wasn't really clear. And sometimes people can take away value doing that, but I found that my salespeople would take away much more value and we'd have a much more productive conversation if we had a detailed and structured agenda. These dogs know what I'm talking about. Look at them. They're super pumped. It's okay. It's okay. Make sure you put some thought into crafting a detailed agenda And sometimes what I would do, if I knew there was a certain handful of topics I wanted to focus on, I would basically pre-write a handful of powerful sales meeting agendas all at once. So it's kind of like when people meal prep for the following week. I would essentially agenda prep. Whereas, if I dedicated a good solid hour to creating sales meeting agendas, I can come up with 3, 4, 5 powerful topics of sales meeting agendas. And then, of course, with our detailed sales training book that we have, I can take whatever necessary copy or content out of my sales training book and essentially include it in that sales meeting agenda. Because it's amazing what you can do when you narrow your focus and you have a specific target or topic at hand. And of course, turning your sales team into a mastermind group, which is really the goal. It's amazing how much you can achieve together in terms of advancing and improving on those topics. And what I used to like is where my agendas, of course, had the headline topic. Here's why we want to improve on this area. And if some of you are using technologies like Sira or Data, or Sira or Rilla, and you have some data that speaks to the subject at hand, you can basically speak to the data as to why we're covering this topic, because it makes it non-negotiable that everyone can benefit from improving in this area. And then also have some areas on your agenda where reps can share their own ideas. So I'd always include some blank sections on my agenda where salespeople can get together as a mastermind group and fill in their own ideas and thoughts on that topic. And I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But again, have an agenda that's going to keep your sales meeting far more productive and keep it much more organized, which salespeople ultimately do appreciate. Next thing is, make sure when you have a sales meeting that you keep the energy and the vibration and the emotion positive. So too often I've heard of owners and leaders that basically bark at their salespeople during sales meetings. It's all about negative pressure to perform. And basically the salespeople show up after having a long week. The world's already beating them down because there's so many negative forces all around. And then they come to the sales meeting and the owners or leaders grenade on them, tell them how much they suck. And if they don't pick it up, you're going to fire them. So remember what I said earlier about keeping people inspired? There's almost nobody in these people's lives they're going to really understand what they're going through better than you. And there's almost nowhere else they can go to get that boost of positivity, that boost of motivation they need to keep their head on right. So those of you watching this video, to be successful in sales is very much the 6 inches between your ears. If they have stinking thinking, if I reinforce their negative thoughts, feelings, they have that cloud of energy around them, that's not going to inspire them to want to perform for the betterment of the company. So I want to make sure that my salespeople come to my meetings and it's a positive vibration, positive thoughts, positive feelings, positive energy. Because my goal is not to beat them down, is to lift them up. I always talk about the sales leader at the top of the org chart, the top of the metaphorical triangle, right? Looking down on their team, barking at them, negative pressure to perform. I was always the opposite. It was an upside down triangle. I was basically at the bottom of the triangle, lifting them up and supporting them. And sometimes I like to think of a good sales leader like a trampoline, where when the salespeople fall, the trampoline is there to bounce them back up and get them back on their feet. That's a lot of what I try to focus on. So I always focus on what can I do as a sales leader, because you got to lead yourself before you can lead anybody else. So what do you got to do to get up, to get positive? So if you're a sales leader preparing for a sales meeting, I need to make sure I'm doing my affirmations, that I'm listening to positive content, whether it's a certain podcast or a video or a self-help book, whatever it is, whatever I can do to get in the right mindset. So when I show up to that meeting, I can bring my A game and get my team fired up and kind of transfer that belief, energy, positivity, and passion to my team. So you got to have a positive attitude. This isn't about negative pressure to perform. This is about positive mindset, positive vibration, and you got to do the inner work yourself. So if I'm going to bring positive energy to my sales meetings, I got to be willing to put in the work to get my mindset right, and then I'm in a position to transfer that energy to my salespeople. Now, of course, more than money, people nowadays appreciate recognition. So assuming I have a set agenda, assuming I come to the meeting with positive energy, I need to take some time to recognize performance, because recognition means more to your team than money does. I promise you it does. Whether or not they'll say it out loud, they appreciate that pat on the back, that opportunity to be recognized in front of their peers more than anything. So I just like to kind of kick off, along with my positive energy, my positive vibes, kick off a meeting with some form of recognition. There's a lot of different ways I can do this. Of course, if you have any team or individual sales competitions going on, you can recognize outstanding performance. Basically, you can track how people are pacing for winning the monthly competitions. We often broke our sales team up into 2 separate teams, where half the team was basically going against the other half, or half of the sales team was going against the other half. So we would track which team's in the winning, which team's losing, and what does the losing team need to do to pick up the slack to beat the winning team. But also just recognizing outstanding performance individually. I almost found that each week there is almost always a story where a salesperson was given a tough opportunity, a very challenging lead, and they were able to be creative, persevere, and come up with a way to overcome that and close it. Especially if a salesperson was, let's say in terms of their KPIs, are not having the greatest week, but I know that there was a scenario where they were overcoming a challenging situation, were able to close that sale. I want them to share those experiences with everybody else. Because when salespeople see their peers closing business, they automatically assume it's because they're getting all the good leads, right? They're getting all the gravy train scenarios. I always found it was pretty eye-opening for my team when salespeople would share the obstacles and challenges they were able to overcome, and instead of using it as an excuse as to why they didn't sell it, they're able to be solution-oriented to figure out a way to sell it. So very positive, and that's a great way to recognize somebody, is get them to share a story of how they were able to overcome challenges and obstacles and inevitably close that sale. So recognition's everything. So going over the KPIs, going over month to date, year to date, how are people pacing their goals? How are we pacing our goals as a company? But then recognizing people on an individual basis, giving them the opportunity to share that with their peers. That's going to boost their confidence, boost their ego, and they're going to really, really appreciate that, being able to share that with their coworkers. Now, a lot of people like to spend most of sales meetings covering housekeeping. So if you're running sales meetings right now and you find that it's mostly housekeeping, you're definitely doing it wrong. Housekeeping, more often than not, needs to be kept on an individual basis. So what I mean by that is typically when there's challenges going on with certain policies, procedures, or let's just say poor conduct or behavior, you can probably narrow down a few individuals on your team that are responsible for most of that. And again, knowing that my goal is to motivate and inspire them, I don't want to bog down the energy and the positive feelings of the sales meeting by just talking about all the things people are doing wrong. So if there is housekeeping, I keep it brief, but more often than not, I try to keep the housekeeping for the one-on-one meetings I have with salespeople. So if I know there's a few offenders, a few people that are responsible for most of the challenges, I'll sit them down in my office behind closed doors one-on-one, and we'll address that as needed. But when I have the opportunity to influence the whole group, and this is why sales meetings are such a gift, right? Because it's one of the few opportunities I have as a coach to get my whole group together at once and have a major impact and influence on their performance as a collective unit. Because more often than not, let's say, I'm a field manager and I'm riding along with reps. And again, I'm a huge advocate for riding along, but you kind of feel like you're just putting out all these fires individually, and you put one fire out, a new one ignites, and you're kind of chasing your tail. With sales meetings, it kind of allows me to wrap my arms around my whole team and have a major impact on their mindset and performance all in one shot. So it's definitely a gift for the salespeople and for the sales leader that I want to take seriously, right? So again, housekeeping must be brief. Traditionally, you want to do that one-on-one as needed. If it's something you definitely feel compelled to share with the whole team, just do it in a way where you're not making them feel bad, you're not making them feel insecure, you're not putting them down, yelling at them and barking orders. Keep it positive. So now, if you're using data-driven tools like Xero or Rilla, This can certainly enhance your sales meetings, because you don't want to craft your sales meeting agendas based on gut instinct, theory, or hunches, or you certainly don't want to go through all the excuse making your salespeople are guilty of and try to craft sales meetings accordingly. And what I mean by that is a lot of owners and leaders, they'll basically have their salespeople debrief with them after a sales encounter to tell them what happened. And of course, a salesperson giving you secondhand, distorted, and tampered with information, information that obviously they're trying to cover their butts, right? So it's not always the most truthful and forthcoming. So that's really difficult for me to base trainings around all the excuse making.
The next level of your business is going to require the next level of your leadership. That's why on August 26th to the 27th, Grosso University is going to be bringing together some of the most successful leaders in the home improvement industry for our Extreme Leadership Workshop. This 2-day intensive training will take place at the all-new Grosso University campus right here in Madison, Wisconsin. The Grosso campus has limited seating for just 100 leaders, so do not wait. Reserve your seat today by contacting Grosso University at 888-GROSSO-U. I can't wait to see you at our Extreme Leadership Workshop, and on behalf of the entire team at Grosso University, yes, you are a closer.
So if I have a means, whether it's for me riding along with reps and all the evaluations, what I've seen in the field, or using products like Rilla or Ciro to actually have x-ray vision and visibility on what my team's doing, that's what I should be using to craft sales meeting agendas. And this is why it blows my mind, because I know there's many clients that are customers of Ciro and Rilla, and they still don't craft sales meeting agendas. Do you know you can go and ask Ciro right now, if you're a client of Ciro, say, Ciro, what are the top 3 areas my sales team needs to improve upon based on last week's performance? And Ciro will look through all the recordings, all the transcriptions, and it'll tell you, boom, 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 here's the top 3 areas that your team needs to improve. And you're like, okay, Ciro, so based on these 3 areas, what is the number 1 area that you would focus on for our next sales meeting? And Ciro will literally tell you what the number 1 area of performance should be. And then take it a step further, you can ask Ciro, hey Ciro, can you type me up a sales meeting agenda, a 60-minute sales meeting agenda that's hard-hitting, that would help us role play this topic, dive into it, where we can basically help the entire team improve on this subject? And Ciro will literally write the damn agenda for you. These are tools I wish I would have had, I would have killed to have as a sales leader, because I was doing all this stuff manually as a sales coach, is way before any of these technologies were available. But again, the more you can make data-driven decisions to make those sales meeting agendas, that's all the better. Now, of course, it goes without saying, drills for skills pay the bills. Role playing. How often are you role playing with your salespeople? Because of course, I'm meeting weekly with my salespeople. I have a set agenda. I'm bringing in positive vibrations. I'm going to recognize my team, go over the KPIs, keep the housekeeping brief. I'm going to make data-driven decisions. We're going to have specific topics that speak to exactly what my team needs. But then role playing. I almost never see people role playing in sales meetings. Now, here's one thing I wanted to talk about. Human beings, they have this amazing ability to transfer energy to one another. And one thing I can promise you is it's really hard to do virtually. So I know a lot of people like to do all their company meetings virtually over Zoom. And I've attended so many company meetings where their salespeople are attending from their home and their cell phones are off. Their cameras aren't even on, their audio's off. And I had a policy that, if God forbid you have to attend virtually because you physically can't get there, if your camera's off, you're considered absent. So figure out a way, if you are having virtual meetings, mandate their camera must be on and must be fully in tune with what's going on. They must be actively participating into that sales meeting. But ideally, as much as humanly possible, try your best to have all your sales meetings in person. So that human-to-human connection, that exchange of energy, and certainly when you're role-playing out stuff, it's really hard to do that virtually and have the same level of impact. So like at Mad City, we had 5 different locations across the great state of Wisconsin where I live. And essentially what we do is we made the investment, because we knew how important sales meetings were, where every office, every brick and mortar location had an 85-inch TV, had premium sound, had microphones mounted all over the ceilings. So even though we're all remote and we were in different locations, we could basically have sales meetings like we were all together. That was super powerful. And essentially I mandated that the people, they were in their respective market or territory. So if they're in the Madison market, the Green Bay market, the La Crosse Eau Claire market, Milwaukee, whatever it is, they had to be at that brick and mortar location in person with their peers. And then from there, we would tune in virtually from office to office. So figure out a way for your salespeople to meet in person. So when you're going through the topic, the subject matter, they're fully in tune, they're focused on what you're saying, and also so they have the opportunity to role play with their peers. But I used to love carrying two hats into every sales meeting. One hat would be a certain part of the process. It could be a certain close. It could be a certain sales tactic like asking questions or telling stories or using hypotheticals. Or it could be some formulas or frameworks like the keys to building trust or objection handling frameworks, formula of a masterful presentation, whatever it is. Or certain parts of your company story or product demo. You can do this with anything. But I would have two hats I'd bring into every sales meeting. One hat would be a certain part of the process. Let's just say a part of the product demo. And the other one would be all the names of my salespeople. So what I used to love doing is draw one part of the process at random and then draw one sales rep's name at random. And that salesperson had to come up in front of their peers and role play out that step in the process. So let's say that the theme of this sales meeting is price conditioning. So then I would basically pull out a certain part of the product demo. Let's say I'm selling a window. Let's say it's the window frame itself, the window frame, the UPVC resin, whatever it is. That salesperson would have to come up in front of their peers and essentially sell that frame of that window. And we want to hear especially how they price condition that feature or benefit. That's just an example, but you can do this with absolutely anything. So I like this because it keeps salespeople on their toes. They always have to be prepared to contribute to meetings. They never know when their name's going to be called. I'm not waiting just on people to volunteer to share this stuff. I'm basically making it so it's mandatory. If people show up to meetings, they're going to have to get physically and mentally involved and contribute. And sometimes it's surprising. You're going to grab a salesperson's name at random and they're going to come up and deliver something that's truly immaculate. They're going to share some wisdom that's absolute gold. And sometimes you'll have a rep come up that you think is a top performer, and they'll actually go through this exercise and crash and burn. And that's pretty eye-opening when that happens. And that's the reason why we want to do this, is because you never know who needs to improve on what until you put them on the spot to see how they actually perform. So drills for skills. Another thing I used to like to do is take a certain topic. Let's say I'm trying to get my sales team to get better at asking questions, because in sales, questions are the answers, right? So I would basically go through our company story or a certain part of the product demo, and I would break up my sales team into groups of 2, 3, or 4 people, depending on how big your sales team is. And I would have them get together as their own little mini mastermind group. So let's say I'm trying to go through my company story and we're trying to come up with as many questions we can ask the prospects as possible to keep them talking. So that would basically break them up into a mastermind group. And the exercise was come up with as many questions as you can in the company story to keep the homeowner talking. And it was absolutely powerful, because when I had my whole sales team coming up with all these open-ended questions to get the homeowner talking, all of a sudden we would have hundreds and hundreds of new questions. And then of course the goal is to share all those questions with everyone. So we turn our sales team into an open book culture of sales leaders. And that's how you cultivate that mastermind group mentality. So it's a simple phrase that I know some things you don't know, you know some things I don't know, together we can do great things. So when you get your whole team working together to achieve a common goal, it's amazing what you can achieve. But you gotta have role playing, you gotta have drills for skills. You gotta figure out a way to make these things interactive. And that's where your salespeople tend to take away the most value from these meetings. And that's also why they want to come back. Because every time they come back and they're role playing and drilling and rehearsing, they get better at the craft, they sharpen the axe, they learn something new from you and from your peers. And it keeps them excited and eager to come back each week. So another very powerful thing. So obviously having the set agendas, being positive, recognizing your team, making sure that keep the housekeeping brief, drills for skills, make sure there's role play, invest some time to make sure my agendas are data driven, not just based on theory or my hunch. And then also, one thing I almost never see is give these salespeople some assignments. So if there's a certain topic that I know we need to improve upon, it may take more than one meeting to really master it. So I'll introduce the topic in a sales meeting. We'll obviously educate the salespeople on it. We'll role play it, we'll drill rehearse, and then give them an assignment. The expectation is that between now and next week, everyone masters this step in the sales process. And basically the following week, let them know we're going to be putting people on the spot to basically cover this step in the process in front of their peers. That's why the agenda is great, because it also gives you something you can physically hand to that salesperson that they can take back with them, so they know exactly what's expected of them if they're getting homework or getting an assignment done. So a lot of great information here. I can talk for hours about sales meetings, but the last thing I wanted to talk about is, again, you want this to re-energize your team. So I always figured out a way to end every sales meeting with some motivational segment. Whether you're showing a motiversity video, which are really powerful, there's some motivational, inspirational speeches. Maybe there's a podcast you watched that was really inspiring, or maybe there's a book you were reading that there's a certain chapter or certain paragraph in that book that was just ultra inspiring and really cultivated a different mindset in your mind. I want to share that with my team. So one thing that I started doing is almost like book studies, where it's like each week we're going to read through a chapter of a self-help book together. And that's a really powerful thing. It's almost like your own internal book club, where we take a book, and it could be a mindset book, it could be a sales book, whatever it is, whatever's going to help them sharpen their skills and their mindset. So we basically unpack that together in the sales meeting and make it a discussion, and then mastermind how can we implement that into our lives today. And I find that when I leave every sales meeting on that positive motivational note, that's that additional burst of energy, that jolt they need to go out there and perform at their best for the coming week. So you can see sales meetings are a lot more than just, I'm going to show up to a meeting and wing it, and I'm going to talk about housekeeping, it's going to be Q&A, and then we're going to leave. I see sales leaders where it's like, hey, what do you guys want to talk about today? What's on your mind? Hey, don't get me wrong, sometimes that might work, but for the majority of the meetings, let's have an agenda, let's have a target, let's have a focus, and use the power of all the brilliant minds in your sales room to really try to solve the challenges and problems that we're all going to be facing in this really difficult profession of outside selling. So these are some ways that you can craft sales meetings that people actually want to attend. And I promise you that if you can implement these things, your team is going to absolutely snowball and accelerate its growth. And you too can be a top performing apex level company in your respective market and territory. So I hope you enjoyed this content. It is about 90 degrees out. Thanks to my son Elijah for joining me. I see him sweating over there. So very interesting topic. Of course, if you need more coaching on how to conduct world-class sales meetings, Grosso University has got extensive training on the subject. It's something we do all the time. As a matter of fact, every Monday, we have what's called our Monday morning mastermind, where we basically do the Monday morning meeting for companies all over the United States. And again, all the things that I was just talking about are things that we intentionally try to implement into our sales trainings at Grosso University. So we do practice what we preach. I just want to thank all of you for your endurance, for walking with me. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, share with your friends. And as we say in almost all of our videos, we understand that most people that watch our content don't subscribe to our channel. I promise when you subscribe, you will not be disappointed. I assign to my team that our free content that we serve up on YouTube must be better than all the paid content in the industry. So if you want the best content in the home improvement industry and you want it for free, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You will not regret it. So I appreciate your time, and on behalf of Grosso University, yes, you are a closer.